We're back for another week in the Limitless Leadership Lounge, and this week's guest, I'm really excited to have on. Coach has connected us with one of his close friends who is also an author and a speaker, an entrepreneur, and really excited to dive in. I am John Gehring, joined alongside Dr. Numa Kareem and Coach Jim Johnson. If you're enjoying the content we're bringing to you here every week, whether it be solo or with an additional guest, please leave us a review up on your favorite podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. And also make sure you're subscribed up on our YouTube channel as well. Coach, go ahead and introduce our guest today. Let's dive in.
Yeah, I'm very excited. A longtime friend, and he's actually one of my brothers, Tom. Marty is one of his best friends. So I've known Marty for a long time, going back to the high school days. So uh, I want to share a little bit about Marty, and then we'll get delved in here. And so his passion is to help entrepreneurs and business leaders succeed in both business and life. He was fortunate to co-found a company with two incredible partners, and they ended up selling it to a Fortune 100 global enterprise. And so now he's on a new journey, and he's dedicated his life to the intricacies and beauty of leadership. What excites him most is thinking differently and dreaming bigger. His passion project was the Finding Significance. Here's the book for when we put it on YouTube. And I'm telling you, it was one of the best business books. And I don't say that lightly because Marty knows I'm an avid reader, but he did a terrific job. And Marty is so proud of the fact that he's been a husband for a long time with two amazing young adult children. A couple of his accolades. His company was Forbes Small Giants Best Small Companies of 2019. He also was South Carolina's #1 best place to work in 2017 and 2018. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome my good friend Marty Osborn to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Hey guys, it's good to be here.
Well, thanks, Marty. I want to delve in. I took a lot of notes on your book, and we're going to probably go in and out of your book. But the one that, being a longtime coach, it was so important to get the famous Jim Collins, the right people on the bus and the right roles. And I know I was so impressed in your book on how comprehensive you were in getting the right people on your team. Can you take us through some of your process? Because I think people really overlook it. I want to say two things about this. One, of the hiring process, and then two, once they start, that you get them off to a good start.
Yeah. No, it's well, hey, first, thanks for having me. And I think I by the way, if I say the word Jimmy, I've always known Coach as Jimmy. So I met Jimmy, I've been almost 47 years.
Yeah.
And back when I was a freshman playing basketball on your court there at your house, they used to have a
Yeah.
full court, an 8-foot hoop and a 10-foot hoop. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so we used to go at it, but it's great to be here. Yeah, one of the things, I mean, that's always stuck with me, and Dave Ramsey said it is, business would be easy if people weren't involved. And you know, in every business, and even Howard Schultz said Starbucks, they're not in the coffee business, they're in the people business. And one of the things as business owners, as leaders, we really get hiring wrong. Like I hate to say it, but we're really bad at it because we trust our gut,
Mhm.
and our gut wants to do certain things. And so in the early days, we made some bad hires. And as any small business owner knows, they're crucial and they can kill you. And so we really delved in hard of getting to know our people. And we had a saying, it's not hire slow, fire fast. We always said hire slow, fire when you know. And when I did a Entree Leadership Master Series, Dave Ramsey used to do it, and my daughter worked for him, so I watched her go through it. Is they had up to 15 interviews,
Wow.
Wow.
and it kind of freaks people out. But what happens is we have to do it right. We slow down, and we want to make sure we have the right person in the right seat and has the right mentality. The first few interviews, people know what to say and we never get to know them. And so to us, the more we spent time with them, the more they got to know us and them, and really became the hire. The other thing that we're very big on was testing, like personality profile, and you could say a testing assessments I think Matt Doherty was on y'all's show and he talked
Yep.
about the disc profile. And that was one of my favorites, like introduction to understanding information. And what we found with DISC is really tells us a lot about the individual and how they like to communicate and work. And so, the D is sort of that decisive driven, like high Ds are very quick to make decisions. Lower Ds are slower. I's are more extroverted versus on that scale of I, low I's are more introverted. And so depending if you're hiring a salesperson, you probably don't want a low I. You probably want a more extroverted. And then S is stabilizing. And those are the people that high S's want to work with people. And low S's tend to work more alone. And then C, which I always laugh is my favorite, is compliance or caution. And I have very little C. And so I tend to like make mistakes. People will see a PowerPoint and they'll be like, you misspelled a word there. And I'd be like, versus my business partner was a high C, very detailed oriented, very compliance. And so to me, finding out where that actually fell helps you depending upon the role pick people. And then the other test that we did highly was called the Working Genius from Patrick Lencioni. I'm a big Lencioni fan. My favorite book he wrote was called The Advantage, and I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it
Yep.
really was how healthy organizations trump smart organizations. And what we tried to build wasn't the smartest group, but the most open, the most honest, the healthiest group that people got along. But he came out with something called the Working Genius, which we lived and died. And so everybody in our company was tested, every hiree was tested, and it helped us just understand sort of their frame and what they crave and what crushes them. And once you kind of understand that, it really makes putting people, as you said, Jim, at the right seat and the right person in the right seat. To me, that answers the word right.
Right. Marty, before I ask my question, I'm just curious. Your employees, like resist all this testing or all these continuous vigorous evaluation? Because sometime, if you or are you clear with the goal, why you are doing this testing? Like, how do you approach the whole process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think people at first think about that, like, do
Mm.
they want it? We found everybody loved it, and I actually could go grab it, but on every desk we posted everybody's disc profile. So disc, because a lot of
Nice.
personality isn't just for ourselves, but it helps other people. So when I look at somebody on their desk, I know how they want to be communicated with, or
Right.
they know how I want it. And so it really actually became fun. Like when people start discovering the nuances of it, they really start to enjoy it. And you have some of the most fun conversations, and you watch the light bulb go on because they're like, aha, like this makes sense.
Right.
And
Mm.
I'll share a funny story. My daughter, so my daughter she went to school as a graphic designer, amazing designer, went to work for the Dave Ramsey organization as a graphic designer. But I could tell like a year, 2 years in, she just wasn't happy. She loved the company, loved the people, but she wasn't happy. And eventually she moved out of design and went more into their live events team. So she got into more of that stuff. Well, if you look at the Lencioni working genius, there's six geniuses. One is the genius of wonder. Like these are the people that kind of think, what if? There's then I, which is the genius of invention. So these are the people who love to create things, do things. And then there's discernment, which is more you can connect dots. G is galvanizing, which you could say I love to galvanize and preach. E is enablement. So they're more your people pleasers. They volunteer. They're the people on the PTA, the people that always say, God, why did I get myself into this? And then T is tenacity, which is the last 20%. Like these are the people who love checklists and stuff. And so what
Mm.
happens is Lencioni says we have two geniuses, like things that we just crave, and then two working frustrations. And so when I looked at my daughter, when she took the test, she's a discerner, very good at discerning things, and she's an enabler. Working
Mm.
frustration was invention and wonder. And if you think about
Mm.
being in a creative role, you hate to create. Like it frustrates her. So literally every day she was in her frustration. And it didn't matter how great the company was or the people. We always say people leave managers and companies, which is true. But they also, when you put them in a job that in their working frustration, they leave. And so, like a tenacity, just like I said, low C, my frustration's tenacity. You put me in a job that is very checklist oriented, very detailed, like writing proposals, that kind of stuff, it crushes me. And so what we found was people start discovering things not only about themselves, but their teammates. And I think that's when it gets really fun and why they like to do it.
Right. So I can ask you my question now.
Yeah.
I loved when you talked about the secret of great leadership isn't certainty, but uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I agree. I love this quote because I always say that when I'm not sure about anything, everything is possible. So what is your take on this? Because recently we have ousted our former prime minister who was so certain that nobody is going to say anything against her and she's going to continue ruling Bangladesh forever. That is why she was doing things because she was in that comfort zone that nobody will challenge her. So
Right.
that certainty was her downfall. And then there was this huge uprising and she had to flee the country.
Hmm.
So, what is your take? Why should leaders thrive on that idea of uncertainty and not certainty?
Yeah, this one
Mm,
was an interesting one, and I was in the piece I wrote about came from a movie Conclave that just came out, and it's basically
mm,
the Catholic Church and the cardinals are getting ready to pick a new pope, and there's all these fractions growing up, and there's somebody who's like, very certain, and we need to do this, and then there was other people very humble, and there was a speech that just said sometimes, we need to embrace uncertainty. And I just love that line. And what I found in leadership is when we become so certain, we're not open to new ideas. We're not open to being challenged. And um, we think that's what people want. We want to know
mm,
leaders know where they're going. But when they're so certain, they're just shut off. And that to me was almost the genesis of my book. Like, through my career, I got really tired of working for jerks. And and
mm,
and so when I created my own company, I really built a company I wanted to work for where we love our people, love our employees. And the only way you can do that is you have to be open to new ideas. You have to be open to letting people excel and grow and understand who they are. But, unfortunately, I think we keep promoting leaders based on their certainty, based on their confidence. And I think we
mm.
actually hire the wrong or promote the wrong people. And that's when I think we start to run into problems in companies.
So
So true.
that's what I wanted to get into next, Marty, because you talk a lot about working for bad leaders and leaving for your own company after a pretty successful career at the age of 46. So let's talk about some of the bad leadership that you noticed and maybe an example or two of how you learn from bad leadership.
Yeah. Well, I would say we tend to learn more in our failures. We learn more from the bad people than we do from the good people. It just was through the years. I always said I kept working for jerks and yellers and screamers and people who thought that leadership was authority.
Mm.
And that always frustrated me. And I kind of write in the book where, we were in a meeting and we were talking about a new idea and we came up with something. And all of a sudden, basically, the CEO's like, no, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this. And it just dawned on me like he never really cared about what we thought. He just wanted us to validate that. And that just is wrong because, when we're in business, I think the key is right what we do for our customers, what we do for our people, and that whole concept around what we do versus me is I think big. And I see this all the time is the downfall of most leaders is they think it's about me, not about we. And I get it, right? Life is tough. We're trying to make our mortgage, we're trying to grow our career, we're trying to get promoted. And so we keep focusing in on me instead of we. And I believe that if we help more people get, and this is a Zig Ziglar quote, is what I've always lived by, is we help enough people get what they want, we'll always get what we want. And that's where it just frustrated me because company after company, it was always about the leader thinks they're the hero of the story. And that's what I think gets most people in trouble.
It's a great point. In fact, I wanted to say in as far as like one of my big epiphanies in my leadership as a coach that helped turn us into a much greater program is when I decided that I had to find the right answer, and most of the time it was not my answer.
Yeah.
That's a it's easy to say that, but that's a hard transition for leaders, because you said, you're the boss, so you see you got to know all, and I found that is not the case. I knew a lot about basketball, but I wasn't playing the game. My players were.
Yeah.
Listening to them, I think is really important, which I think you did really well with your employees. Let's go back though. Two things. I want you to talk a little bit when you brought on that person. How did you get them off to the start? That they because that is, I think that is neglected so much. Is people, or they hired the right person, then they let them flounder because they don't get them off to a good start. And then the other thing I want to delve in on the same basis is talk about maybe a story about creating what you call magical moments.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the books that I read was called The Power of Moments. Chip and Dan Heath. I don't know if you guys are
Yeah.
familiar with it, but it's fascinating book. And we have an opportunity as leaders to create magical or special moments. And in our team's career, our customers' career, and so many leaders miss that. Like they just day in and day out go by. And so to us, what we believed was the number one best day when you hire somebody. How many times do you hear somebody walk into an office and they go, glad you're here. Your computer's back ordered. We're working on getting your email. Just go sit over here. And when we get it, we'll get you going. Like, who does that? Like, that's just like crazy. Like, it's your best day. It's the day you have an opportunity to set the tone. And so at Advoco, we believed your best day had to be your first day. And when you showed up, we met you at the door. We had your computer ready, you had your email, we had a backpack, which became an infamous Advoco backpack, which became like people would travel and send pictures like, where in the world is the Advoco backpack? We gave you swag. We made sure your desk was clean. Like, and you left with a gift card for dinner to take your spouse or significant other out. Like, we wanted people to talk about that day. And to me, we had that opportunity. And I just watch companies over companies like just miss that boat. And so to us, we looked at moments when we could create something special. I want to tell a story about this,
Please
and
do.
I think, you know, I'll say a couple things. So at Voco, we got to close to 150 people. Over 60% of our company was under 30. Okay. So
Oh,
people would say, oh, the hardest people, millennials, Gen Z, they're hard. We had under 1% turnover. And even after the acquisition, 3 years later, they're still under 10%. So you can create the right environment. But I've always been a believer, again, in this not me concept, but we. And so many companies have like president's clubs, like they'll take the best salespeople, they'll take stuff and they send them on these lavish trips. And it just pisses me off because we keep just reaffirming the same people who are probably the highest paid. It's a teamwork to get there, right? It's like always letting your stars go on trips, but in a team, it's a lot of the other people that make things go. So we came up with an idea one year. We used to have big Christmas parties. We wanted to make it better. And we came up with the idea that basically said, if we grow the company 20%, we'll shut the office down 4 days. We'll take the whole company's significant other spouses to the Caribbean.
whoa.
Yes, that's the look I want. Is we shut it down, and I swear that first year by August we were already past the goal. Like
Wow.
people were
Wow.
so motivated by something that's just non-compensated, but had the best time, and it treated everybody. So administrative staff, HR, everybody. We either all eat steak or we all eat hamburgers. And I tell you, those
Mm.
first trips, the pictures I have of the company, like all the people in the foam parties and in the pool dancing together, like it created an amazing set of unity. And
Mm.
it just became our culture. Like we win together, we lose together. And when we got put up for South Carolina Business of the Year award, I mean, there's a whole story in the book, but it basically they count down from 45 and it's going down. And I actually had to be in Nashville for my daughter's birthday. I wasn't even at the award ceremony. I sent some other people
Mm.
and they start like, I get this text, we're top 20, we're top 15, we're top 10, top five. Oh crap, they forgot about us, like everybody, like we couldn't win. I thought it was pay to play. And the guy gets down to reading off the number one company, starts reading what we do. We had a chief wine officer. We, do these trips together. He stops in the middle of it and says, "Who does this? I want this company." And that really became our rallying cry of who does this? Because if you think about it on a positive note, like who does this? Or you show up, and I had a friend who showed up at a company, I think it was a nonprofit, and he didn't have his computer, didn't have his email, put him at a desk. There was like Cheeto dust all over, didn't even clean a spot. Like, who does this? And so
Mm.
that just sort of became our rallying cry to creating certain moments is how you wanted that to be done or said.
Yeah, and I think the moments count because that is the bonding that happens in those moments. And recently, after one of our events, although we did not have that much of a profit, but I knew that to raise that team morale, I need to give them a break. So I took them to a trip, and you can see the whole team after getting back, and they were making fun of each other, enjoying, taking pictures, and after they got back, they're in more higher level of productivity.
Yeah.
So it's not waste of money when you are
No.
spending on your team.
Yeah.
Not at all. One of the phenomenon I'm observing that many of the younger people from millennials and Gen Zs, they would rather prefer to be an entrepreneur rather than working for somebody nowadays. Many of them have that tendency, and I have seen that after a few years, many of those entrepreneurs are not on that track and they get back into the job search.
Yeah.
So, what are being an entrepreneur and being on those top list? Can you help us identifying some of the major characteristic of that sustainable characteristic of an entrepreneur? Because not everybody, I think, is built to be an entrepreneur. It's from my perspective. Not everybody has all those qualities. What are some of those major qualities that you found out that an entrepreneur should have?
So I think the number one thing in entrepreneur, I spend a lot of time working with young entrepreneurs now and so forth, is I think they have to have the belief and that there's a problem that needs to be solved. What
Mm.
happens is if you say you want to be an entrepreneur and you think about the money, you think about the freedom, you think about, oh, I've got this great idea. I almost predict most of these people will fail because being an entrepreneur is crazy. I always say, like, starting a business, like pushing a train up the hill. I mean, it is relentless. And if you slow down, that train's going to run you over. I mean, you're
Mm.
working for no money, you're gone all the time, you're
Mm.
trying to convince people. And so, to me, if you aren't driven towards a passion to solving a problem, then I think that's to me what I look for in an entrepreneur is that there's truly a problem that they believe because it's all about the customer. Like when it's all said,
Right.
if this is about me and not we, then that's when we get in trouble. And that's why I think when they want to be an entrepreneur, they're going at it for the wrong reasons. And that's what
Mm.
I typically think. Because I'm not quite sure. I look back like the stuff, the failures. I mean, I've been in more businesses. I mean, I hate to say, people love they're jealous of the success. They're not jealous of the work. I
Mm.
failed a lot of companies. I've four or five. I mean, Jimmy knows that I've been through. His brother Tom's a great entrepreneur. He it took him 5 or 6 shots before he hit it. And
Mm,
so entrepreneurs aren't right in the head from that standpoint, but we have a
right.
passion to solve a problem. We have a passion that says the world needs this. And when that's the
Mm.
driver, then I think that's sort of what separates it.
And
Mm,
I think also that you're ready, willing to take some sacrifices. So you're willing to sacrifice your time with your friends, money,
Mhm.
so many things. And many young people I've talked with, like they want immediate result. They got the seed money, they got a renting space with like a Google type setting and all those things, using all the money there, because they found out that they got those 10 million or some seed money, but that patience, and suddenly when things are not working, they just want to sell the business
Yeah.
and get out of everything. So these are some. So thank you so much for sharing that major
I,
point. I think
I have
all my listeners know.
yeah, I have a saying that
Mm.
it's that finance, like raising money, isn't success. It's just a countdown clock timer.
Oh yes.
Because if you think
Hmm.
about it, people take money and they think that's success. And that's my other really like getting into bugaboos is the amount of people that are trying to raise money. And I'm like, go sell something. Like your customers, like,
Mm.
because once you take money, the game changes. The clock's ticking now for results. And I don't think most people realize that. And that's when the pressure changes. And so, I
Yes.
like to say, you sure you want this money because it does not come free.
mm,
Mm. So
mhm.
true.
Yeah.
You talk about reframing your mindset to a problem solving mindset. That's just so important because there's really only a market for something if it solves a problem or adds value, right? How would you suggest a young entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur test that area, like whether or not there is a market for a particular idea? We know that, diving into it without testing isn't a good idea, but how do we test it to see if our idea is viable and a problem that needs to be solved?
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's a hard one because I gotta say the ultimate test is somebody writes you a check, right? And it's hard, like, because you're thinking about a product, you're trying to develop something, and how do you do that? And you can talk to a lot of people. And um, I'm a big Chris Voss fan. I don't know if you guys like in negotiation, but our biggest challenge in sales is the counterfeit yes. It's
Mm,
people want to be nice and will say, "Oh, it's a great product, John. What you got? That's exciting," until they have to write a check and those counterfeit yeses. And so, what I would say is maybe a reverse on that is while you're out there, what you really want to find out is the no's. Like you don't want the yeses. And I write a lot about this. I'm a big believer in the ultimate goal is to get to know as fast as you can because no sets boundaries.
Mm.
No's tells you where you stand. And what happens too much is these counterfeit yeses is people get excited. Oh, it's a great idea. Oh, they'll love it. But they're just being nice. Like they don't really want to hurt your feelings. And so, what I found in most interactions, whether it's selling or asking a client, is I always want to have like a poker chip called the no chip. And I want to hand it to them and say, look, I don't know if this is for you. So at any point in time, if you don't think it's right, just tell me no and I'll stop. Right. Because we teach sales is like perseverance, get to yes, get to yes. Oh, my dog. I was like, what the hell? My dog jumped in the back. We're so anxious to get to yes that what happens is we get blinded by what's going on. So to me, if I've got a product or whatever, talk to a customer is look for no's. Like, tell me why this isn't going to work. Tell me why you don't believe this is going to happen. And so to me, that's I kind of flip that back to that point. And but people are afraid of no's.
It's a good thing because I always used to talk, our coaching staff is that you got to do autopsies of the bad and the good, and
Mhm.
figure out the good you got to systematize and the bad you got to get rid of and change it. So yeah, it's a great point. I got to delve in because for our listeners that don't know that you are a Clemson grad and a big Clemson football fan, can you tell us a story about the safe stool with Dabo Sweeney? Because building culture is so important. I know it was something you took a lot of pride in your business, and it's something that certainly Dabo has done quite well at Clemson. But can you tell us his story?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a junkie. I graduated Clemson '84, so I've been going to games ever since. And when they hired Dabo Sweeney, he was one of the really different people in terms of his approach to how he does things and what he's going to do. And so um, we got a chance to actually meet Dabo. Um, it was through like a donation to his Heartball Fund and so forth. And so we go and we get to tour the facilities, we get to meet some of the players. Like this is just a dream come true. And you get to meet David. I get to talk to him, and I'm thinking, I can't ask him about football. I can't ask him, hey, coach, we're gonna have a good team. And I'd heard a story a little bit that he had this stool for players, and I wanted to ask him that question. And I got to his office, and I look in the corner, and it's three-legged leather stool. And so I'm like, Dabo, I said, what's that stool in the corner? And his eyes light up. He brings it over and he sits down. But one of the coaches had brought it from Puerto Rico, and it was kind of called the BS chair. And it was a fishing chair where whoever had the chair would sit there and get to tell the stories, and they would sit around and BS. And what Dabo felt like, he had a really good team the year before. We lost in the national championship, but he felt like the team wasn't connected and they didn't know each other. And so what he did is he took the stool, and after practice, he would put it in, and one of the players would go sit on the stool, and anybody could ask them any questions, and they would tell their story of their lives. And what happened is people started realizing things about their teammates they never knew. Whether the dad was at home, how many, maybe it was multiple parents, just stuff that went on in their lives. And what happened was people started understanding maybe why somebody was a little bit callous. Maybe they were acting like a jerk, and they were, carrying a lot of this weight. And so through that storytelling, and he sits there, and you think about Dexter Lawrence, 340 pounds sitting on this little stool. It's just a hilarious story. But what he figured out was the key to winning was bonding of the teams, getting to know each other. And the next year, obviously, Clemson won the national championship. So it was kind of a really cool piece to learning more about him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll say one thing before I let one of my colleagues ask another question. Is we used to do a activity with our team called "If You Really Knew Me," and in players, we did it with partners, and we also did it in front of the whole team. And it's amazing the things that people would open up. And you're right, the more you know your people, the better you can be, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Renuma, you're muted at the moment.
Yeah. My last question for Marty today. We are observing like a shifting landscape in geopolitical, economics, so many areas, and the entrepreneurs have to experience all these changes. So, what are some of your advices, or what are some top challenges do you think entrepreneur today have to get ready to face, and how would they navigate through these uncertainties nowadays?
Yeah, I'd say though, it's funny is I think we've always been in uncertainty.
That's true.
We look at different worlds and we look at different challenges. I mean, whether it's high interest rates, low interest rates, geopolitics stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about today's world, there's never been more money out there. There's never been more access to leadership information, podcast information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think today is one of the greatest days to be an entrepreneur. What I believe is, I always say, and it was funny, I used to say leaders are readers. Like to
Mm-hmm.
me, when I try to find out a leader, an entrepreneur, one of the first questions, and I know nobody reads more than Jim. I mean, they're like,
Oh yeah.
but that's where the world of new knowledge like helps teach us. And to me, if you're going to go out in the world as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and you're not reading and you're not putting new thoughts in your head, I don't believe you have a chance, because then you think it's about yourself and you have all the knowledge, and we don't. And so I think
Right.
today, like even social media, like YouTube channels, like starting a business, doing the things that are out there are some of the easiest ways to do it. I will say the one thing I find with most entrepreneurs miss is the marketing side, like the drip side, like showing up. Like it's never been
Mm.
easier to show up, whether it's video, podcast, email campaigns, newsletters. Like they have to show up. And what I find is people think, I build a product and they'll come. And I think that's the part that, you know, as we all know, the only really one key to success, it's called work.
Right, great. That's a great point.
And
Why I asked you this question because many of the entrepreneurs now who are in TikTok, they're like worried and screaming because China said that they're going to shut down TikTok in America, and everybody's afraid. Like, now what if TikTok is gone? All our business and everything is gone.
yeah,
So that mindset, like, how do you motivate them to remove themselves from
yeah.
the mindset?
I mean, let's put it this way. If you talk to any great entrepreneur and you talk to any successful entrepreneur, they've been kicked in the teeth. Like you're going to get kicked in the face. And I even talk about it in my book. Like I was, you know, I left the company I was working for. It was a software company, and I believe that the clients weren't being serviced. Like we had this great product, and people would be like, why doesn't your product do this? And I'm like, it does. And so I just used to complain about the services group all the time. And then they say, you got to put up or shut up. So I said, all right, I'm going to start a software company, or I'm a service company doing this. And so salespeople would recommend. Well, the CEO of the company found out that the reps were recommending me. And this is like a $2 billion company. And I was like a $2 million company. He literally had a meeting with everybody in the organization, said anybody caught talking to Marty Osborn would be fired.
Wow.
So
Wow.
overnight in one conversation, all my lead gen, everything, like TikTok, it's gone. Like it's gone. And you have to sit there
Mm.
to entrepreneur. You can either say that was unfair, like this sucks and complain, or you just find another method. And what I ended up turning to was drip email marketing. And I started something called Marty's Minute. And if you go on
Mhm.
YouTube, you'll go see some old videos. I just stood in front of a camera for a minute. And I would like just some leadership topic, just because I didn't think people were reading much. So I did a video. First month in, I get a call from a friend who's working at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. Said, "Hey, I saw your video. That was really cool. We've got a project we're getting ready to start. We'd love to talk to you." And turned into a multi-million-dollar deal, all from this
Wow.
crazy idea that I think the best thing that ever happened to me was getting kicked in the face. So I do think we have to be as true entrepreneurs is it's coming. Like there's going to be failure, there's going to be challenges. It's how we respond, not react to that. And I think that's one of the keys.
That's so true. I can't even begin to tell you how true I'm sure that is. And from what we've heard from other leaders who have been through a lot, we hear the same sort of thing. And one thing that they all have in common, I think one thing that all great leaders have in common that you talk about, and one of my favorite of your five keys, Marty, that you talk about in your book, Finding Significance, is the one about learning and about constantly, like, if we look at the seven habits, it's the concept of sharpening the saw, right? You say that learning is a superpower. I've never heard of that because, leaders oftentimes we think they've known it all and their superpower is their knowledge, not their continuous will and desire to learn. Talk about the inspiration for that phrase and why learning for you is so important even after all your success.
Yeah, that's so funny you saw that. I was actually at a bookstore, like a small family bookstore, and there was a sticker. I don't know where it is in my office, but it says reading is my superpower. And
Mhm.
I was like, that's it. I mean, again, if you go back, I was, your C student in college. Never got any awards, was never a big reader, never a big writer, whatever. But when I got out of school, I started just listening to the tapes. I listened to, the greats, Zig Ziglar, Tracy, Earl Nightingale. I mean, just classic guys. And when I traveled, and again, I'll date myself, cassettes, jamming cassettes into but that's how it just started. And to me, reading and learning just opened up new worlds to me that I never knew existed, or the way people thought. And people always ask about mentors and so forth. And, the problem I had is I didn't, through my career, I had a few, but my mentors were the books. My mentors were these the greats of the greats. And I actually started writing sort of memoir called Guided by the Greats. And it was the books that I read, the lessons I learned. Somebody always asks, like, they say, what's your favorite book? Well, it's obviously Finding Significance, but but you can see my bookshelf here, and this is just a sampling of stuff. But one of my favorite books is The Challenger Sale. If anybody's seen Matt Dixon, like he talks about in selling is the salesperson that usually wins is the one that's challenging their clients to think differently,
Mhm.
right? Teach me something new each and every day. There's a book, Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets. I don't know if you guys, but I love watching poker on television. It's weird. But if you think about business, it's not a game of chess. Chess is played out in the open. If you think about business, it's like five card draw, or it's like Texas Hold'em. The flip of a card, you can be winning, and a flip of a card, you're losing.
Mhm.
And you have to think in terms of risk. You have to make small bets. And so I might have a client that I can't get them back on the phone, and everybody's like, "Oh, they're ghosting me," or whatever. You have to make a small bet. And what my bet might be is I'll send an email that says, have you forgotten about me? Right. And it's just these little things. And people will be like, no, 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 sorry. Like, you almost have to put a bet to see how they're going to respond. But so many people are so kind of obsessed at the outcome, but it's kind of moving forward. And so those are some of the one things. I do want to say something before we go. I do want to talk about, Jim, you and your book.
Mhm.
Like, to me, when we talk about, and one of my keys is called the power of moments, and we talked a little bit about this.
Right.
I still get chills thinking about the J Max story.
Mhm.
I think that book needs to be re-released. I think you need to get that back into the world. But I got the chance to sort of follow that as it went through. And I don't know if you, Jim, you remember, Coach, that we had a guy in Anderson, the radio story. Remember the guy from Ren High
Yes. Yep.
School? And
Yep.
I
Yep.
introduced you to him, and that was going on. So I got to follow that journey. When the book came out, I invited Jim to speak at one of our conferences. And it was the first time I've probably had 5 or 6 clients come up crying, saying this was the greatest thing ever, that ultimately they were either affected or had a child of autism. And
Mhm.
what you did for JMac, like that story is magical. And I don't think it's timeless. And to me, it just needs to be repeated that we can do things in our teams' lives that are just different, and they can create something magical. And so to me, Coach, that was like, I still, in my heart, like that is always in my mind, thinking about what we do for other people, a selfish act. And again, you didn't do it like through the years. You could have put him on the team, but you kept him as a coach. Like there was a whole process to that. But then ultimately, you created magic. And so I think as leaders, we have to think about that. We have to think about what we're doing with regards to that. So,
Mm.
Well, Marty, I really appreciate your kind words. I got one final question, and then I know John will wrap up. But thank you for your kind words. I will say it's funny because when you talked about mentors, I've had a few too. But like when people have asked me about my mentors, my two greatest mentors, I didn't meet either one.
Mm.
Basketball was John Wooden, and I just studied and learned so much about, him. And then the late Jim Rohn was my other mentor, just learning about life. And it's funny, my wife always kids me since Jim Rohn passed away that I could continue his legacy because I know every one of his lectures. But that's how much, I became a student of trying to learn more. So, which leads to my final question. I love this because one of my favorite comedians is Jeff Foxworthy, and you put the famous if you're a redneck if and you put it in the perspective if you may be a great leader dot 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 fill that in to close our
well, I always thought, yeah, Jeff Foxworthy stuff's classic. You might be a redneck, right? If you cut your grass and you find more than 3 cars, he just had funny things that just did it. And we were sitting in a meeting one time, and people keep asking me, like, is that a good leader? What's a good leader? And all that could play in my brain is you might be a great leader if, or you might be a jerk if.
yeah.
And so to me, people ask that question, and you might be a great leader if, right, you put your team ahead of the others. You might be a bad leader if you're condescending, or you might be a bad leader if you put yourself ahead of others. And so to me, that was always something like just to keep thinking about. That I do want to say one other thing kind of in the book, and that's been a cornerstone of what I've thought about is as leaders. And sometimes, we talk about purpose, we talk about mission, and I think all that stuff's great. Ultimately, what goals, mission, vision all have in common is that they make the unconscious conscious. And
Mm,
as leaders, what happens is day in and day out, we react, we say stuff, but we don't think about the reaction we get. And that what we need to do is be more focused on being more conscious in our leadership. And that's when I talk about at the beginning of the book is leadership brand. Bezo nailed it and said, brand is what people say about you or your product when you're not in the room.
mhm,
For a leader, that's important. And I would say the biggest exercise I would say to leaders is, pause the video right now or pause the podcast, but take a minute to write down what are 3 words that you would like people to say about you when you're not in the room.
mm,
Right.
right.
That's because I think sometimes people get hung up on sentences and, purpose. I hate to say this, but sometimes I don't like talking about purpose because that's very me focused.
Mhm,
But brand is what other people say. And so write those 3 words down. The second thing then is to write down the 3 words which you think your team says about you.
mm,
Right. That starts to get interesting. And the last piece, I will say this, if you have guts, you actually go out and send an email and ask people to say 3 words about you.
mm,
And that's what happens is when those are in balance, that's when you're hitting the mark. But when they're not, like that's when things like I always said, what causes good people to be bad leaders? It's just they're not conscious of what's going on or their effect. And so to me, that just simple concept of the good news is you can fix your brand. The bad news is you have it. Like
yeah.
whether some people say like, I don't give a shit what people say about me. Well, that's a brand. And
True.
as leaders, as individuals, like that's what we have to be conscious of is what are people saying when we're not in the room. And once you solve that problem, then I think you become the leader people are happy to see.
That's awesome. Hey, Marty, John will wrap up here, but I just want to express my gratitude. We really appreciated your wisdom today and look forward to continuing our friendship. So thanks so much for being a great
Well,
guest today.
yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for digging in.
Yeah.
If you're looking to change your leadership legacy, I can't recommend this book highly enough. Finding Significance. It's 5 keys to becoming the leader people are happy to see. That is Marty Osborn's book, and it's up, I know, right now on Amazon, Marty. Also, you mentioned the audio's coming out, so by the time
Yep.
this is released, hopefully it is out, and so you can get it on Kindle, on Amazon, wherever you find your books. I like the hard copy in hand myself because I look at enough screens in my life, but also listening I know is a great option too, and one of the things I do. So finally, Marty, you have your book Finding Significance. We definitely encourage our audience to grab that. Are there any other ways that they can connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, I think, well, one is you can, martyosborn.com. Also starting a new company actually with Coach Jim's brother called By Design Advisors. So we're starting to help companies as they either look to grow or to sell. And what we found is, when people are looking to exit a business, there's not really advisors to talk to them. The M&A, the investment guys, they're all transactional driven. So,
Mhm.
Marty.osborn at By Design Advisors is also another good place to find things out. And it's actually funny as I used to say, leaders are readers, but somebody says, "What if I listen to books?" So actually, if you look at my book, it says leaders are learners. So
There you go. That
well, I
counts
don't
too,
want to
right?
exclude the audio people.
Listening
That's
counts, absolutely. Well, Marty, we'll get those links down in the show notes, those By Design Advisors, as well as your website, martyosborn.com, and of course, the Finding Significance book, which is a must read for all young and emerging leaders. Marty, thanks so much for your time today on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. We learned so much.
Well, thanks for having me.